I personally feel that television in general is probably, well, all right, let me put it this way. When I was a kid, we dreamed of magic. A magic thing was a picture that you could talk and that you had in your own home. And it was magic. It was pure magic. And we're living with a miracle. We're living with a modern miracle. Primarily what it's used for is thought control. It's used to make you feel inferior. I'm not talking about Channel 68. I'm talking about the conventional media. It is not a learning tool, but a conditioning tool.
With more room for the things you need, and things you don't need, too.
It's a mistake, I think, to visualize commercial broadcasting as even being in the programming business. They're not in the programming business at all. In the sense that a record company is in the music business or a motion picture company is in the film business. A television company is not in the programming business. It is in the audience selling business. You are bought and sold like so many cattle. Their language is cost per thousand, just like cost, price per hundredweight for cattle. There's a cost per thousand associated for your head and what they can do to turn it around. The broadcaster is in the business of selling you to an advertiser. You are the product. You are the product. And the advertiser is the consumer. All right? Now, once you get that straight, it's a lot easier to understand what's going on that screen.
It's simple. Ford wants to be your car company.
Television, the instrument, is a drug in and of itself, It's a mesmerizing force. I mean, I'm sure that all of us have sat in front of the tube for 4 or 5 hours sometime, and then all of a sudden came out and said, huh? What am I doing? So I think that it is a mesmerizing tool, but I don't, the only reason that it's on so much, the only reason that it's 24 hours a day or however long it is because there's someone that wants to sell something. And that's, in my opinion, what KVST was not supposed to do, was to drug people or mesmerize them, but to bring them to a new form of consciousness about who they are as persons and where they are in the society.
Yeah, the station could have been an effective tool, like it was originally advertised. It could be. At least I felt it could have been.
Effective tool for what?
An effective tool for social change. Getting some information across to people in a dynamic, interesting, enjoyable, palatable way. At a low cost, too, I feel. Television can literally show people what they can do to improve their lives.
This is KVST-TV, Los Angeles, Channel 68. KVST-TV is owned and operated by the Viewer-Sponsored Television Foundation, a non-profit corporation, and is authorized to operate on Channel 68 by the Federal Communications Commission. Our studios and executive offices are located at 1136 North Highland Avenue in Hollywood, with transmitter facilities on Mount Wilson. Our studio to transmitter link is WAC 203. On behalf of the management, staff, and volunteers of KVST-TV, we invite you to join us now for our broadcast day.
This isn't for real, is it?
All your people sit right down. Open up
strawberry shortbread. Oh, strawberry shortbread. Strawberry shortbread. Strawberry shortbread. Oh, you people sit right down.
Hello, my name is Pat Benson. Welcome to Strawberry Shortbread. Tonight we will address the question, but why, Mama? This is for working mothers, and but why, Mama, comes from every baby, no matter how old they are at some time. Why are you so tired? Why do you cry so much? Why are those papers so important? With me are Sadie Harris-Steen, Directress of a Child Development Center, and Richard Thomas, Spanish-speaking eligibility worker for the Department of Social Services here in LA. Okay, here we go. This is where we get to tell them the kinds of things that they need to know, all right?
Pat, what was Channel 68?
A mecca, a potpourri, and a community.
Okay. What was the concept of it? How was it conceived and what was behind it?
As I understood it, it was to be a potpourri of all the cultures in the community, and it was to have been supported by the community and activated within the community.
With what desired effect?
Communication of all peoples.
A lot of committed people there who wanted to work and make good programming, important programming, you know, in the area where the station's original focus was supposed to be, you know. Production of socially relevant problem-solving kind of programs that were supposed to get out into the community and really address themselves to what's going on, to really get down to what the problems really are and what can be done about it, you know. I mean, a lot of commercial stations are doing documentaries. They're all fine and good. They're laying out a problem to you, but they don't offer any solutions, and they really don't get down to anything that's very controversial. If it's going to be very controversial and it might step on a few toes, the networks don't want anything to do with it. Now, we wanted to do just that. Go straight to it, you know, and say, you know, okay, you got something to say, lay it on the line, you know, and we got this guy over here who thinks you're full of shit, you know, and we're going to have him come over and tell you what's wrong with what you're saying, and we want you guys to hash it out right here on the air.
My question is to Senator Cranston. I understand that President Ford has called for us to all come together. Now, obviously, if the young people who oppose the war in Vietnam have been pretty well joined by 95% of the population, don't you think you ought to introduce a bill giving them complete and unconditional freedom?
I think there should be a far more effective and far-reaching amnesty program than the one that was proposed and operated for a limited period of time with limited success by President Ford. I do not believe, however, that it is feasible to achieve total blanket amnesty for all individuals, regardless of what they did. I think that is just not a way that we can resolve a very difficult problem.
Because you couldn't get it passed in the Congress.
Catch Burton.
Well, I'd like to...
Go ahead.
You know, I mean, it takes a president to issue amnesty, and none of us at the present time are president. So then it takes a... Well, you want to listen to it or you want to not?
It's an experiment in television. I think the experiment was continuing and moving along. I think it had a certain number of successes and I think a great deal of failures. There's no doubt about it. It did not affect a great deal of community change in the year that it was on the air, not that I can see, although in some ways it did. I think a key success was the program, The Citizen Intelligencer. I know that Bert Wilson, who was the co-host of The Intelligencer, the producer of it, and also the head of Cause, which was a group that tried to effect some social change in Los Angeles. One of the main causes of Cause was to knock down the ARCO deal by which the people of Los Angeles would have to pay in advance for ARCO's exploration of oil rights up north in northern Alaska. And partly because of the publicity gotten from the citizen intelligentsia, and partly because Bert Wilson is a very, very fine and forceful person, he won in that battle. And considering the fact that that show at one night got 600 letters, which means 100, perhaps 100,000 viewers, that being on TV and having his show aired on Channel 68 helped that cause. Very direct social change there, I think.
This is Los Angeles, a place of many tongues that need a voice. All of us need that voice. Channel 68 has an obligation, has a commitment to supply the voice, to be the voice. Idealistic, yes. Grandiose, quite possibly. But achievable? That's up to you.
KVST-TV is a viewer-sponsored television station. We have $15 and $25 regular sponsorships, $10 senior citizen and student sponsorships, and we got one for $5 for low income, so we have everybody. Okay? Please, if you can, please do. All right? Now, we can wrap up.
I have never been able to relate to Channel 68 too well as a viewer. For the pure and simple reason that it's a very difficult channel to get in. Even when you're watching yourself on television, it becomes totally frustrating to see it through a fog, to have the audio blurred. And so as a viewer, I must say that I was too frustrated to ever see too much of what Channel 68 was putting out.
We had some problems technically with the transmitter from day one.
Oh, I remember what happened. It was during the big push to get the station on the air, and we worked endlessly for week after week to get the transmitter built. Every day, driving up to Mount Wilson, 6 in the morning, staying up there all day, coming back about 9, 10 at night. In the wintertime, it was cold. There was ice all over the place.
Who built the transmitter?
Workers. The KVST people, volunteers. They try to cut some corners here and there and ended up wasting a bunch of money, but that's another story.
The station was on the air almost a year when we discovered that the antenna was on top of the tower, was tilted in the wrong direction, and that we were servicing San Diego just great, but many people in the west side of Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley were having a lot of trouble getting us.
They didn't know who their audience was. For a while, they thought it was going to be third world people, and for the most part, and somewhat the community at large. That was the original doctrine, according to Stouffer. And as it turned out, I think it got into competing with KCET audiences, the upper class, Beverly Hills, Glendale type people, liberals, because that's where the money is.
Supposedly, there is a large base of support within the minority communities of a lot of people giving a little amount of money. Well, Channel 68 never reached this. They never got that support now. They never got it because they weren't worthy of it, or they never got it because it just isn't there in reality. The communities, the black communities, Chicana communities, don't give money to things like this. I don't know the answer to that question. I only know the reality, as I understood it, was that we didn't get a lot of money from these areas. Now, then we are left then with a typical upper white middle class support. Well, this station riled a lot of these people, the normally large vested interests, and so then we have to deal with specific individuals in that community. Well, for one thing, our transmission was bad. We didn't get to a lot of these people. We weren't on the cable for a long time, so we didn't get to Beverly Hills and places like that. And also, we just weren't, at this point, slick enough to get these people to watch because we didn't have the money to do large investigative programs, because we didn't have the money to have a veneer, a look of excellence and quality. A lot of these people didn't watch us or were turned off by the kind of low-key look that the station had, down-home look that the station had. And therefore, they didn't give money to it. So the station did not have a viable base of financial support. It was always in financial trouble.
The station was always trying to catch up with everything. One of the primary things was money and lack of organization, not only in the production department, but everywhere. I mean, just totally everywhere. I don't know if I should go into the elements of that, but one of the biggest drawbacks is their organization. I mean, what are the priorities, you know? How do we see like ourselves at the station a year from now or so? How do we, you know, plan? What is the policy? How can the community become part of, et cetera? Does the community just walk in and, you know, and then how does the community participate? And that seemed to never be quite properly delineated in terms of, you know, on paper. And that was another kind of a frustrating part.
As far as having a real relationships community, I don't think we had one. We had one with certain community groups. It was haphazard. We didn't have any continuity in those relationships. We mainly had relationships with strong individuals, you know. But as far as being a clearinghouse of community ideas and a turnover of needs and projects, it was not. It was hit or miss. And again, it gets back to the problem of equipment. We only had the capability to do a minimal number of shows on that studio floor, and we were absolutely trapped into that format.
We did sometimes 4 or 5 live shows a night, in which all that we would do is we'd have one show set up and one set, and because we only had one set at that time, so we would have one show on the set, then we would go to a pitch in another area where Peggy, myself, or Cliff Roberts would do an ad for the station. And then we would change the chairs. If there were 3 people in this show, instead of 4, we'd take one chair away, seat these other people and get the new graphics up, and in the 3 or 4 minutes it took to do the pitch, we'd go back to a live show. And we'd do a live pitch, go back to another live show, a live pitch, another live show. And it was crazy. I mean, we would switch crews in the midst of the pitch. And remember, these aren't professionals who've been doing it for 25 years. These are many people who are being trained, you know, like that afternoon to work a camera.
They were having training programs on Tuesday and Saturday, and if one chose, one could join. And the only thing that they asked of you was time. And time I gave, okay? I started out by cabling cameras, and for those people that don't know, cabling cameras means you literally get down on your knees and you push and pull a cable, which is attached to a large television camera. And from there, I became a camera jockey, and then a floor director, a little bit of directing, and then off into producing and moderating. And over a period of 18 months.
And I just came right off the street knowing nothing, and joined an organization called BATE, Black Awareness in Television, which had an hour-a-week airtime at that time on the station. And immediately went into a type of internship, learning how to operate the camera, the lighting, the sound, floor directing, interviewing, and I was on my way to technical directing when the station closed down.
I was with the station for a little under 2 years. I started out as a volunteer, and yes, before it went on the air, and helped with any way I could. and I progressed as a production volunteer, cameraman, audio, video, technical director. Finally, I moved into the engineering department as a paid staff member and did videotape operations, video air switching, and whatever else had to be done.
I think interstation or inter-office communication could have been better, especially access to the engineering room and the technical room. I would have liked to at least observe the process. Besides through the window, I could have actually communicated with Randy and the other engineers.
The equipment was not the right kind of equipment to give people power. It wasn't equipment that could be used easily, could be moved around. It wasn't equipment that you could teach people how to use. You had to have engineers to run the videotape recorders. You had to have people, you had to push everybody into a hot recording studio. You brought people out of their environments from the community where they didn't feel safe, where they had to sit under hot lights and try to be themselves. You took them out of their environment and you robbed them of some of their power. You also forced them into a media format, a traditional old-time media format, and so they weren't in control of the way they were being represented. And I don't think this helped Channel 68's relationship with the community at all, because people continued to view media as a force that could potentially hurt them and use them.
The time for questions is over. Now is the time for answers, and the most important answer of all, the identity of the new Miss American teenager.
Come in now, right now, and he'll skin the deal down to the bare bones. Use your head. Buy American now.
People have a very good instinct that media is not out to help them all the time. And particularly when they're forced into this high-pressure situation where they have to be thrown onto the stage and hooked into a chair, they were uncomfortable, and they had a good reason to me. Well, I felt that these things were never talked about. And one of the reasons that they were never talked about was that there was no group at the station who had a radical perspective on media form and media equipment.
It seemed that the station really wasn't ready for us at that point, or that they had their own internal crises or limitations of equipment. We were basically set up to work in the community, and we weren't as willing exactly, or we didn't have the skills or willingness to go into the station and to produce shows. We were more into involving the community in a more direct way, such as using mobile equipment, and they really didn't have the facilities for that.
The original focus of the station was that we would be out in the community, and that we would be portable, highly portable, and we tried to do that right away. At the same time, when the station first started, Clayton very much wanted a studio. He wanted a studio because he felt that a physical plant, was very important for the raising of money, something that people could see. And he was very strong on the fact that we should get that studio equipped first. Now, never, ever was it thought that that portable equipment would come years later, or never. Remember, at that time, everybody was very optimistic about, as soon as that station was on the air, the money was going to come in. The important thing was to get the station on the air. Once we had that vehicle, once we had the air, we could raise a fortune. Now, And then we could get the mobile equipment, and then it would just move from there. So in that critical decision, when Clayton had to decide whether the station would just be in somebody's garage with a lot of portable equipment or whether we would have a studio, he opted for the studio. And his priorities were fundraising. He needed a plant, he thought, to raise money. He needed people to come down and show them that it was real, that this idea that he had worked on for 6 or 7 years, which was just a piece of paper, had reality. There was a studio with cameras. People understand cameras, and people understand monitors, and people understand a staff that's there in one place. So he really wanted the studio as a fundraising vehicle, in addition to the other things that a studio does. But it was never his intention that the station should be locked into that studio. Far from it. All that we ever talked about was getting out and being on the streets.
So looking back, do you think that the station went on the air or moved into the studio prematurely?
That's pure conjecture. You can say that it was a big mistake, that the station would have been highly successful if we weren't tied to a studio, if all our money went into portable shows that were dynamic and exciting. Or you can say that Clayton was right, that the money he did get was large part due to the fact that the station had a studio. I don't know the answer to that.
If they had had a fleet of porta-packs, they could have easily serviced 10, 20 porta-packs very inexpensively. They could have set up 3, 4, 5 editing systems. And they could have taught skills on a revolving basis. They could have sent porta-packs out with just about anyone. And they could send it out with an engineer or not, depending. Have people bring back that information, bring back the news, edit it in the station, and put it on the air.
Channel 68 did use half-inch tapes that were made by people out in the community, but how they put them out over the air was relatively crude. What happened was the tape would be played back on a half-inch portable deck, and the image that you got out over the monitor, well, it's all right. It's coming. There. See, the image you got out over the monitor was then shot with a camera like this one, only bigger. And the signal then going through that system was amplified to broadcast quality. So what you got over the air then was proper signal strength, but very grainy. Shooting off the monitor was the only alternative the station had to using a processing amplifier and time-based corrector, which cost over $10,000 and they couldn't afford it. But the audio came out pretty good this way, anyway.
Que me inflama el corazón, como el gallo que en la fría madrugada echa el aire con orgullo su cantar. En el campo, en las ciudades y montañas, levantemos este grito a todo dar. ¡Viva César Chávez, hombre de verdad! Él nos dio la llave y se encuentra la unidad que abrirá el camino a la justicia y libertad. Arriba pues que Cristo por nosotros estará. Si se puede, si se puede, si se puede, sí se puede.
And we want to be recognized as humans, even though a lot of us aren't American citizens. We live and reside here in the state of California. We pay taxes, utility bills, just like everybody else. And yet, being a farm worker, it's like the third dangerous job in the United States, next to construction and coal mining. And our benefits don't amount to anything. And why should I, as a farm worker, feed most of the nation and at the end not have enough for myself or my children?
It was an experiment. I think it was a vital experiment, and I wish it could have gone on longer. I think it was a tragedy, a major tragedy for American television that this station went down the way that it did.
In addition to the money problems and the technical problems that the station was having, a political element began to creep in. And it grew increasingly complicated, but very basically what happened was we were having a fundraising telethon in June of '75, and several Chicano members of the staff and the production volunteers felt that it was being planned in a racist nature and that they weren't being sufficiently involved in the plans for the telethon. And so they refused to participate and to work on it. This brought the ire of the current management.
And from there, a schism occurred that spread not only from the Chicano staff members and the management, but it spread to the board of directors, and a big split on the board of directors occurred. And the meetings became huge arguments. Nothing concrete was being accomplished. They were just arguing back and forth in the board meetings, and it was hurting the station terribly. The station wasn't raising any money, nothing was happening, and all the functions of the station were being sublimated by this big argument that was happening. And it got very bitter at the end. It was personalities, and people were calling for each other's resignation, and there were threats of violence. And people on the staff, like I had been good friends with some people on the staff, and because of all this other things that I really wasn't involved in, my relationship with some of these staff members went down the drain,
And I heard people talk over and over again about how, well, it's personality clashes, People just don't get along. Wrong. That wasn't it at all. What it was a lack of, first of all, a lack of a political analysis of why turn to media, What's the importance of media to a community, and what are we working toward? Are we trying to revolutionize society with it? Is it possible to revolutionize a society with a single television station? Or are we just trying to give new people access to the media and patch things up a little?
It's not enough to just to talk about one or two community television stations. You have to talk about the fact that the most of the information that most people receive every day is from corporate-owned stations where there's no input at all from the community in a responsible fashion. So it's important to develop community TV stations, but it's also important to develop some sort of apparatus for connecting those TV stations with the greater movement to fight against the broadcast biggies, as well as the newspapers and the radio and every other kind of media in our country.
I don't think that $1 million will help that station. I think that the only thing that will really put community television on the map is if they get portable equipment, if they create a real community access program, and if they rationalize work at that station. I mean, if they write an employee contract where the relationships between the workers and how work is going to be done is really upfront, out in the open, and talked about, where they have grievance procedures, hiring procedures, where they have staff meetings, and they've also they have to deal with the problem of how to make decisions in a group. And that means that group really has to get to know what production is all about and what it does to human relationships.
I think whenever you have an organization that is dealing with social change or dealing with the community in any way, and that you got a lot of individuals and there's a lot of power being dealt with, whether it's in the particular institution or if the power is directed outward, like in television or radio, I think that you can depend on one dynamic individual like they did at KVST, and sometimes you will succeed. You will have a personality, a force that can take you through all your crises, that can be a leader. But more often than not, you're not. You're not going to have a leader, and you're not going to find one. And leaders aren't forever. You got to design the system in such a way that the power is going to be centralized and decentralized at the same time. And the only way to do that is to have a factor where everybody has the same amount of power. And there's no way that an individual can dominate. It has to be run by the group.
To give people that are the consumers of the television station a voice in decision-making and the internal affairs of the station. And that would mean having both worker control and consumer control, and not to have one overshadow the other, but to have them working in concert, and to have structurally that built into the station, not just a tokenistic once-a-year membership meeting for the people who subscribe to the TV station, but to have day-to-day active involvement, at all levels.
I came from a radical perspective on communication. I think communication is owned by the ruling class, and I think that in order to put communication in the hands of the people, we have to reorganize our sense of what we want to communicate and for whom.
Now that KVST is gone, like the loss is so tremendous that even if there was a little hierarchy, it would be nice if it were still there. Yeah. I mean, because like the potential that we on the outside could go, I don't know, like that whole potential is gone now, and it seems like it's really sad.
I think showing that a station like this could get on the air was very important. I think that it's a sign that to other stations that it is possible to get a license, that the FCC will indeed let a station like this on the air.
Now it's history. Possibly one of the finest research projects conceptually in the United States at this given time, mid-70s. It is defunct, but I do not sincerely believe it is lost, only because those of us who were involved in it carry the experience and carry the knowledge and carry the wisdom, carry the technique with us. And for myself, I'm not employed in the media at present, but in the educational activist work that I do, hey, that's good knowledge to have had, to keep, to use.